the 20 days after birth, but the majority happens from day 42 to a year later. So I talk about a lot of that and the top 3 reasons why women die. And I think when you hear the conversation about morbidity and mortality, most people go to, oh, that was bleeding, postpartum hemorrhage, that was the cause of it. Cardiac reasons, we know that's another really big reason. We talk about sepsis or infection. We talk about everything, but we don't talk about the maternal mental health piece of it. We don't talk
Mhm.
about suicide and how it really plays a role. And so, again, I'm happy to have this conversation because we need to normalize that so that people can know everything to look for, not just the bleeding, not just the cardiac, not just sepsis, not just preeclampsia, all very, very important. But what about mental health? So, with
Yeah.
that, I'm going to turn to you and see what you want to say to the people and how you want to get us started.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am first off just honored to be in this space. I'm so grateful for the work that you all do and inviting me to this virtual table. I am so passionate about maternal mental health and particularly for Black mothers. And I'm so glad that you kind of set us up in that way because most of my work has been with mothers who have young children. So from birth to age 5. And I've worked with pregnant women and parenting persons, birthing persons as well. But there is something really critical about the early years that is important to understand. And if I can be my full self, I can't stand how folks have tended to blame Black mothers for the struggles that they face and also the struggles that their children might encounter. You're talking about low birth weight, you're talking about prematurity, right? So the children sometimes have some delays or disabilities of different kinds that emerge from coming into this world early, right? And sometimes there's some blame that happens in that, but we know that there are stressors, many stressors, cumulative stressors that happen over time that really are factors that we need to consider when we're talking about who might be most at risk of struggling with their mental health postpartum. And to know that that period of concern is not just 6 to 8 weeks after they have the baby. Mothers can experience um, depression and anxiety, and even post traumatic kinds of symptoms well after that brief period after birth. And it's important for us to know and understand that because the literature has definitely been showing that that period up to a year is where we need to be really asking more questions and trying to understand the stressors that are then causing some of those mental health symptoms. Also, knowing that there are some mothers who come into the process with a history of mental illness or mental health conditions that make them more likely to struggle postpartum. And that's important for us to follow them and support them, but to know that we're not out of the waters. And that's what I tell moms all the times that I'm connected to personally and professionally. After you pass that 8 week period, you are not out of the water in terms of the risk of dying and in terms of the risk of struggling with your mental health. And therefore, it is important to really be. Hold on a second. My nephew is talking to me.
I like it when real life happens. It makes it all so much more relatable. So,
Exactly. It's real. It's real. We have real life. But we need to be concerned, I think even beyond 12 months about maternal mental health. There's some studies that are showing that some of the same mothers that are struggling with their mental health in the early postpartum period are also struggling up to a year later, and then even so on and so forth, even up to 18 months. Some studies are showing that link to
Right.
experiencing higher depressive symptoms
Mm-hmm.
over that period of time. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's increased stressors, it's a history of mental health conditions, it's all of these things that are happening that are causing more stress. And
Mm-hmm.
stress kills. Stress is
Mm-hmm.
literally impacting our bodies and impacting our minds and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
important to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you raise a really great point. And I think maybe for a minute we can talk about the mother blame, because I think that's one conversation that we haven't had as much as we can, because there is a lot of narrative that is actually blaming women for the situation that they're in. Um, and what I know for sure, like there's this one term that I have grown to really despise in healthcare, and that is non-compliant. um, I'm
Oh,
like, don't,
don't do
please
that.
don't ever use those words around me, because we
Yes.
do not know what people's lived experience is. But as we think about the mother blame, and you talked about stress and stress killing, maybe we can talk for a little bit about the impact of stress, chronic stress, and
Mhm.
the increasing of your cortisol and inflammatory processes, all the weathering piece. Do you want to talk for a minute about that? Because I think it's important for everyone to understand that as Black women, as Black birthing people, we come into the situation already at risk because of chronic stress and because of our exposure. So talk to the people a little bit more about that so that we all
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, I think it starts with us understanding those social determinants of health and how when you look across all those kind of main categories, access to healthcare, social and community context, like I'm visual, so I'm visualizing this with y'all. You're talking about employment and wealth and housing, all those dimensions, right? And on the
Yeah,
outside
food
of that, it
security.
yes, food security,
Mhm.
transportation, all those things are there, right? But throughout all of that, there's structural and systemic racism. So those are the conditions that are creating these disparities. And when you think about it, it makes complete sense. Those families who are most impacted by those factors have more stressors. That chronic stress over time is weathering them. And the ways in which bias impacts the interactions they're having with people on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I've experienced it myself as I walk into the school, as I go into the grocery store, as I go into my own healthcare appointments. I'm experiencing racial bias in all these everyday interactions and spaces. And those are the things. That's why they say racism kills, because those stressors and experiences really do accumulate and impact a person. And anybody would then start to question their belonging. Anyone would question if they could trust the people around them, or if they are safe, if their children is safe, if it, you know what I'm saying? Like walking
Mhm.
down the street, am I safe? Driving down the street, am I safe? We don't know. I think that it's important to consider how those every day, for some people, it might feel like um, just basic life experiences. For us, they're baked in bias,
Right.
and that is stressful. And so then that does create more fears, that does create more sadness, and like it impacts our motivation, our energy. It literally drains us. And like you said, the weathering piece, it over time, it really does impact us. And I think that it's important for folks to understand that after you go through those kinds of things and then you're interacting with formal health or mental health professionals, yes, we might be apprehensive and we may be in those spaces questioning a person's ability to help us because of how we've been treated and how we are being treated in that moment, right?
Right.
We may question if we can trust who we're talking to. We may question if they can hold our truth and if we can be fully authentic in those spaces. But the reality is that we know that there are risks, and there are risks when we are our full selves. There are risks when we are passionate. There are risks when we are in bad patterns. You know what I mean? If you're struggling with substance use or addiction kinds of things, and you are Black, you cannot say those things when they ask you those questions, because then you have child welfare involved, right? And I think that those are some of the things that I like to lift up, that we have to be perfect in those spaces. We cannot make any mistakes or have any missteps or have any struggles of any kind, because then we are perceived as unfit, and unworthy, and then resistant because we
Mhm.
don't necessarily want to disclose all of our truth. And so it's just
Mhm.
so complicated. And I like to complicate things because it's not as simple as me not showing up for an appointment or
Right,
choosing not to share what I'm experiencing with
right,
whoever I'm interacting with. It's much more layered than that, much more complex than that, because every time I share what I'm going through, there is a risk that I'm taking. And I think that that's what folks have to consider. If a person is sharing and their voice raises, does that mean they are aggressive or resistant? Or can we experience or express passion or
right.
concern without being labeled as aggressive
Mhm.
or a threat? That, like, those are the things that I think when I think about how folks label us and speak about us, and those things impact how people interact with us too.
Mhm.
And then how we interact with them. It's a dance. If you're
Yeah,
coming at me this kind of way, then I'm
right.
seeing how to be in that space, and I'm deciding if I want to do that dance with you or not.
Mhm.
And most of the time we choose not to. And the sad part is we don't get the support and the help that we need, because we cannot really be fully true about the struggles that we have, because we are um, penalized for our struggles. And
Mhm.
folks don't see the many factors that are impacting our capacity to um, be well, to do the
Right.
things that we want. We just don't, we experience more barriers to access, we experience less opportunities, we experience um, care that's less than quality, less
Right.
than good enough. And
Mhm.
because of all of those things, that's impacting how we show up.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you definitely raised a great, great point as we talk a little bit more about noncompliance and about the social determinants of health. So instead of using that label and saying, oh, I remember getting reports so many times in life, oh, this patient has been noncompliant. Well, help me understand what that means. So maybe instead of creating that label, we ask some questions, help me understand why you haven't been taking your medications.
Hmm.
Oh, because I don't have insurance right now,
Right,
or the copay for this medication is $500 and I
right.
don't have $500. Or, hey, I've taken this medication and it has significantly impacted my ability to function and to keep my job. So there's opportunities for us to ask more questions before we label folks in a certain way, because the labeling is harmful because you kind of set the precedence. Because I know when I would hear back in the good old days when you'd get report on all the patients, when you'd hear this person is non-compliant, everybody already has formed an opinion.
Hmm.
So we engage with the patient in a way that's not helpful and is
Right.
actually harmful because we have set that expectation about them. So you
Yeah, and if you engage with them at all, because I've seen folks
right,
notice or read those charts and notice those labels and decide, I'm not even going to bother,
right,
right?
right.
I'm not even going to interact with them because I don't know how they will be, right? Or I need to bring somebody with me to have a conversation with them because I'm not sure how this
Mhm.
will go, right? Like there's all those strategies that are taken in place to kind of avoid interacting with folks, and then also create an environment that really feels less and less safe.
Right. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about some conditions that predispose women to mental illness after birth. You talked about having a history of mental illness. Can you talk to us a little bit more about some of the things for us to be aware of? Definitely the social determinants of health, but what else would make someone at a higher risk for postpartum depression,
Hmm.
or even postpartum, the whole spectrum, postpartum psychosis? What are some things
Yeah.
that we should be aware of?
Yeah. Interestingly, some of the risk factors for postpartum maternal mental health conditions, that be depression, anxiety, severe psychological distress, and also like post-traumatic stress disorder and those kinds of things, it starts out with race. So it's race at this point because there's not enough studies showing that racism, but racism is a factor. Folks' experiences with racism and biased care is a risk factor. In terms of race, you're talking about folks who are Black or identify as Black, who identify as woman are more likely. Those who identify as folks of sexual orientation and gender minorities, those folks are more at risk. And I'm think about intersectionality in those different intersections of identity. Those generally have been found to be some of those risk factors. Income, those who have lower income are more at risk to be, when you think about it, it makes sense. Lower income, unemployed, increasing stressors, right? So that's the way that you want to think about it. Additionally, folks who have experienced more adversities. So somebody gets fired, somebody dies, loss of partner, moves. You know what I think about all the families I've worked with and how frequently those things occur for folks. And so it starts to make sense once you start thinking about those things, that some of the things that we know about the people that we're working with, some of the struggles they face, some of the things they're experiencing, many of times the literature is supporting that all of those are indicators that there's a relationship to. If you're experiencing multiple kinds of events that are stressful, then you're at an increased risk. And those with the highest risk starts out with folks with that history of mental health concerns, and then history of adversity, childhood adversity, but then also current and present day adversities of different kinds. Those folks are more likely to experience mental health challenges. When you think about it, it makes sense because their bodies are being wired differently with every stressor.
Right.
And without the opportunity to cope, right, and learn strategies to manage their stuff in healthy ways, they're less likely to recover. And then the next stressor compounds their experiences. And it's like the perfect storm to continue to be in this cycle of the struggle.
Right. Right. I think you raise a really good point. I remember when my eldest daughter first started doing some seeing a therapist to talk through her emotions. And one thing that she shared with me, I think she shared it at the dinner table. One thing that her counselor said that really resonated, and it was secrets make us sick. And it was such a compelling thought as you talk about life stressors and also talk about adverse childhood events, our ACEs score, when you think if something happened to me at age 5 and I never talked to anybody about that, I
Right.
just kind of suppressed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was 15, my mom was killed, and I never dealt with that. And here I am, 28, and I'm pregnant. And
Right.
now there's this floodgate of emotions, and I don't know where it came from, but it
It
sounds
goes
like,
to the nursery.
right,
Yeah,
right.
the things they really do, they come back.
Mhm,
I think that folks don't recognize sometimes the ways in which their past experiences impact their present.
mhm,
In one of my research projects, one of the moms who participated in my study, I will never forget it because it was just so powerful. And she just talked about one thing after another happening in her childhood. And just, she talked about, I just bury those things. I bury them. But then she was pregnant again, right? And about to have another child. And she's like, for some reason, those things keep coming up for me. And it's one of those things that you don't want it to catch you off guard, right? Because
right.
then I think she started recognizing, like, I feel really sad. I'm really struggling to get motivated. I have a lot of fears. I'm really struggling. And she, for some reason, started having more memories come to her from her past. And she then was like, Amita, I think that my past may be the reason why I'm struggling right now, because things are okay right now, but I don't feel okay inside.
Mhm.
And so I think that it's that piece where she said even that folks around her told her, don't bring those things up, don't talk about those things, leave the past in the past. I think about how in my family, folks say, let sleeping dogs lie.
Right.
And I think that's a struggle for Black people, in that we have this tendency to just keep on keeping on, right?
Right.
We've experienced a lot of grief in the last 2 years, right?
Oh my
And
gosh.
most folks are just like, let's move on, let's move on. No,
Right.
we have lost a lot in
Right.
this last 2 years. Folks have lost jobs, and more so than that, folks have lost family members and loved ones. There are mothers and fathers that have died. There's so much loss that has happened, and we just keep focused forward,
Mhm.
and then wondering, why do I feel so heavy? Why
Mhm.
can't I sleep? Why
Mhm.
can't I this? Why can't I that? Because we keep going, 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 because we feel like that's all that we can do. And eventually the body catches up with you, right?
It does.
The
The body
body will
keeps
lay you
score,
down
right?
if you don't lay down. That exactly, the body keeps score, and it
Right.
does remember and respond to all the
Mhm.
things that we choose not to be conscious of, and to
Mhm.
try to protect ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, and also, I really think that it's time to talk. It's time to talk in the safer places about some of those things.
Mhm.
Um, and at least if we are not ready to bring those secrets to light, do some body work to be able to at least work on getting our bodies to a place of calm intentionally, right? That meditation and mindfulness kinds of practice, that yoga.
Mhm.
I don't care if it's trap yoga. We need to start doing some things to really work on getting our body, mind, and spirit, into a place where it can get to a calm and get to a place of
Mhm.
rest. Because
Yeah.
even when we don't think about it, um, our
It's
body is keeping track.
it is absolutely there. So before we talk a little bit more about body work, how do we change the narrative? How do we normalize counseling, especially in the Black community? Because in the Black community, we often hear, pray about it, God understands, and God does understand,
Absolutely.
and you don't need medication, and, trust God and He'll heal you. How do we normalize that? Hey, you know what? God created all of us, including the doctors and the pharmacists and the people who created medication that really works. How do
Hmm.
we normalize that in our community and give people permission to do the couch time and do the journaling and the talk therapy, all of
Hmm.
that? What are
Yeah,
some thoughts for us?
I would say that I'll put out on the table that I don't think that therapy is the only way or even the best way for everybody. And
Mhm,
so I think it starts with us being able to have a conversation with folks about what their experiences have been, and
mhm,
what they think they prefer. Because the thing is most people don't actually know what therapy is, right? And so they're saying that they don't want to do something that they don't fully understand. They have an assumption about what that process is, but they don't really know. And so I think that's part of the struggle. And even with doing meditation or yoga, I'm not about to do that. You want me to do what? Breathing? What? I'm not about to do none of that. You don't, folks, I think sometimes are kind of apprehensive about the unknown. And so
right,
I think it starts with us sharing a buffet of options,
right,
right? And also sharing with people the benefits and the limitations of
mm,
all the available options, given a person's stressors and their symptoms. So if you have a million stressors and you also have a history of trauma and a history of mental health concerns, diagnosis of bipolar, schizophrenia, more severe chronic kinds of things, then absolutely the solutions or those strategies that the supports that we explore, they have to match the stressors and the symptoms. So if your symptoms are more severe, you going and doing I don't know, just a little class about managing your emotions, that might be helpful, but at the end of the day, you might experience more benefits from both ends. So the professional who has expertise in helping people who are struggling with more severe symptoms, you can't wake up, you're having struggle, getting to work, you're having troubles with everybody you interact with, you can't manage your mood. If you're experiencing more severe chronic issues, then some of these other things you can do them, because I really think that folks need to do multiple kinds of things, but you need to do something that matches the level of stress that you're experiencing, the symptoms that you're having. And so then you choose what feels best based on those things. And there's this buffet, as I mentioned, and it goes all the way from formal therapeutic options. There are now ways for us to help folks ask better questions of these formal mental health professionals so that we can get to a good fit. Part of the struggle with getting folks to those tables and normalizing it is that folks have had bad experiences. And one thing that we do good is let people know when we don't like something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
We
we
do.
had a bad experience, right?
Everybody
We do
knows.
that well, right? Everybody knows. And then one person who may need and benefit from that service won't go because I heard that they,
Right.
they did this, and that. And so I think that we have to show folks what are some of the questions to ask a formal mental health professional so they can get to the right fit. Ask what type of therapy they do. Ask what the sessions look like. Ask how long they think that folks usually work with them. Ask who can be involved, because some folks don't want to go as an individual into those spaces. They want to come as a collective because they don't see their struggle as their own. And
Right.
when you're talking about Black mothers, it is not just my fault that I'm struggling. There's a lot of other factors at play, and there are a lot of important people who are on my team and who care about my well-being, and I would love for them to be at the table. So just asking better questions of those formal mental health providers, I think is one of those things. Additionally, you have community supports and informal supports, and those can look a lot of different kinds of ways. In the spiritually oriented spaces, I think the church has a key role in normalizing going beyond prayer and therapy, God and therapy. And in actuality,
Amen,
if you look
sister.
at many of the spiritual texts, right, there are therapeutic strategies baked into that. And the thing is that God created therapists too. And all these folks who have pulled, I really believe some therapies are inspired by God. Some of the strategies that they use are biblically based.
Right.
And a therapist is a coach or encourager, a teacher of those learnings, right? And if we can go and listen and hear from a pastor about how to make better choices in our life, why not go to the person who has expertise in those pieces,
Exactly.
right? It just makes sense. And I think once pastors and spiritual leaders, imams and the healers, when they can help folks understand that they are there and willing to support them, and also know that sometimes folks have stressors and symptoms that are beyond their capacity. And so that's where I think the formal providers need to build better relationships with the spiritually oriented spaces that folks go.
I love
Early
that.
childhood settings, schools, health clinics, like there's a lot of places that people go, community centers. There needs to be better relationships. And I think once there's more better relationships, right, you can bridge partnerships and normalize talking and normalize accessing the service because it's happening everywhere. You know what I mean? It's happening in natural conversation, in natural spaces, barbershops and beauty salons. There's so many, the sky's the limit in how, we could actually normalize talking about what we're going through. And getting whatever help makes sense given a person's situation.
I think that's great. I think that's one of the great takeaways for all of us is it's a buffet. Who doesn't like a buffet? I love a
Exactly.
buffet because I love a little bit of so very many things, you know. So let's be inclusive in thinking that there's several things that could possibly help us. The buffet is good. I love the fact that we partner with our churches and with our leaders and healers to help them be part of the conversation also about normalizing this. And from a Christian perspective, because I'm that girl, I'm that Christian girl. When we talk about, I loved your point that you said that God created the therapist, and sometimes some of the teachings you can tell that it's biblical. We know that every good and perfect gift, which is very, very
Comes from
biblical. Every
above.
good and perfect gift comes from above. So, of
Yeah,
course,
classic.
yeah.
That's
So,
reframing. That is
I
reframing.
like it.
Therapeutic strategy, right?
I like it very much. Marie, I see that you unmuted. Did you want to say something, or Miss Marie, or maybe not? Maybe I'm seeing things. Okay. I must be seeing things. I thought she was trying to say something to us. So the body works. I think that's another really great thing. Along with being a church girl, I'm also a firm believer in taking care of this temple, this
Mm-hmm.
body, and connecting the breathing and being centered in the moment and really pulling our minds in and focusing inward to kind of acknowledge, what am I feeling right now?
Mm-hmm.
So from the body works perspective, is that a buffet as well? Or do you have a top three thing that you think is really a great go-to?
Mm-hmm.
Or is everything good? Can I go and do, I don't know, maybe do something with weights or go do Zumba and hear some really loud music and
Mm-hmm.
laugh and dance. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because I think again, it goes back to a person thinking about their bodies and their preferences, right? If
Mhm,
you're a person who runs anxious, right, you feel more stress in your body and like you feel like you're going to crawl out of your skin, you feel like you need to run, you need to move, then doing some of the quiet meditation, right,
mhm,
might be a struggle. That might be what your body needs to try to do, but it might be a struggle. That's why I say folks should consider exercise. If you need to walk, you need to run, getting outside, that sun and vitamin D out with nature. If you're one with nature, but I'm not a one with nature, nature sometimes gives me anxiety
right,
because I don't like
right.
animals. And
Mhm,
the thought and the threat of animals that sometimes it gets to me to a certain point. I like to watch the sunset. So in that process of going to follow the sunset, I am recognizing, and I think that's the piece. Notice what's happening in your body. If you start to feel more stressed than calm, switch your strategy. Do something different, right? I go back home if I start feeling a little too anxious when I'm on
right.
the walk. And I think about my Aubrey and how once that once he was murdered, how hard it was for me to take those sunset walks in my neighborhood, and every white truck that I saw, right, it was making me think, okay, could I be next? Right. And so I think that once I recognize, okay, I am experiencing some anxiety related to what is happening in the world and in community and nearby, right? And I need to pay attention to my body. And so for that period of time, I could not do those walks, but I had to do things in the house. I love hood, crunk, trap music, like doing the hip hop dance things. I love that because it makes
Mhm.
me feel like I'm back in the club again. But I'm not in the club, I'm in my house. And so those moments, right, when I'm engaging in those kinds of exercise,
Mhm,
I follow a few people who do those kind of workouts online and make them available. When I do
mhm,
those things, I feel good inside. I feel alive. I feel happy. It makes me feel good. It gives me good memories. Then there are other times where I intentionally do the quiet. It's never quiet. Any mama that's on this call who got kids know that it is hard to find quiet and peace. But
Mhm.
sometimes I intentionally seek quiet because I know that sometimes when my body is feeling really stressed, that's what I need. And if I can't get quiet, I get headphones and I will put on, I just Google it on YouTube, quiet, relaxing meditation music. Or they
Mhm.
even have some nice like jazz,
Mhm.
neo soul meditation
Mhm.
music. It is a
Mhm.
whole vibe. And just getting in that space where I put my headphones on and I just
Mhm.
focus on my breath and noticing what's happening in my body. Long story short, I also like healing circles. I just put the plug for those with a leader, a healer. We all have healing abilities, right? But there's something about being in a group with others who are focusing on getting their body in a place where they can calm and move through different types of emotions and release the pain, the anger, the disappointment, the struggle that we feel inside of us in that kind of a space. And it's almost like a container of that emotion, and you feel like it gets held in that space. And you walk away usually feeling better,
Mhm.
sometimes going to church, sometimes going down to the altar, sometimes with the worship music. For
Right.
everybody is different, right? You
Right.
have to pay attention to your body. That's the first thing. Kids want apples and food and everything, not like the door wasn't closed. Go out and close the door. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I love
Um,
you.
exactly. When I'm busy, then they want to talk. But when I'm just chilling, nobody is even
Mm-mm.
saying anything.
Mhm.
But anyhow, pay attention to your body. Think about what your body needs. Think about what you might like. And it's trial and error.
Mhm.
Try something and see how you feel. I told my sister to try Zumba. She wasn't feeling it because she was like, she don't like all them steps and they doing too much and they telling you do. That wasn't calming for her. That wasn't relaxing or
Right. Right.
restorative in some way for her. So I think you
Mhm.
gotta really think about your body and try
Mhm.
some different things, and then keep checking in with your body to see, what am I
Right.
feeling? Am I feeling tense? Am I feeling calm? Am I feeling joy? Am I feeling
Mhm.
peaceful? Or am I feeling angst and discomfort and tension?
Mhm.
Um, then try something else,
Mhm.
and then try something else. But one thing I do tell people is that you always have your breath as long as God has you on this earth and breathing. And that is one thing that I highly encourage every single person on this call to focus on building in minutes. Even if you're on the toilet, I'm saying wherever you can get a minute or 2 minutes where you can just focus on your breath
Mhm.
and training yourself to calm your breath, slow
Mhm.
your breath, speak peaceful words to yourself so that then you can get that mindful practice in and that body work, because it's absolutely necessary and you don't need nothing. You don't have to pay for nothing. Your breath is yours.
Right. I love it.
And it is radical and it is
Mhm.
restorative.
Mhm. Get your own affirmations and
Absolutely.
yeah, speak words of life to yourself. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I
Google
love
trap
that.
yoga and trap aquatics too. If you go to the pool or something. I see Marie talking about the trap music too.
Oh, and Lauren is like, yeah, a little trap music never hurt nobody. We've had lots of laughs about trap music, Lauren, Horton, and I. So yeah, yeah, mindfulness is absolutely very powerful.
Yeah, it
So
is.
I think you've done an amazing job sharing some really great therapies and possibilities for us as it relates to mental health and maternal mental health. We've talked about changing the narrative and removing the mother blame, and we've talked about the impact of racism and the weathering and the toxic stress in our bodies. We've talked a lot about some really great things. Um, we know that the prevalence, or it would seem that the prevalence of mental health is increasing. And I'm curious, do you think that the prevalence is increasing, or do you think our awareness is increasing about it? So 1 in 9 is what I hear most often. Does that sound right to you? 1 in 9
For
women.
Black mothers?
Yeah, no, this is for all mothers, not specifically for Black mothers. So
Yeah, so
give us
I
some
think,
insight about Black mamas and their
yeah,
prevalence rates.
it's interesting, right? Because if you think about it, one of the things I've seen through the literature pretty consistently is the struggle to recruit Black women to participate in these national studies that
Because
are
we don't
trying
trust the
to
healthcare
do
system, right?
prevalence rates. Exactly.
Mhm,
And so where I look to is some of the more community-based
mhm,
studies, regional and local studies
mhm,
that are built into, for example, early childhood programs or schools or um, health clinics, some of the spaces as mothers go. And within there and within those studies, they actually are showing higher rates of incidents where uh, what 20 to 65%. It's a wide range, right? But some studies even 50%. So 1 in 2 Black mothers are likely to be struggling with their mental health. And when you think about it, it kind of depends on uh, if a mother felt safe enough answering the questions in the space in which they were in. Some of the studies that were done in WIC and in early childhood at like Head Start or Healthy Start,
mhm, mhm,
some of those programs, some of the community-based studies have shown really high rates of incidents. And so and this has been over time. It's not new. I think that it's not showing on the national prevalence studies, I think, because it's hard to recruit people into those studies.
mhm,
Um, and I think that two parts. I do think folks are becoming more aware. So what we're seeing is higher prevalence of folks just sharing their symptoms, higher symptoms of anxiety, higher symptoms of depression, but not necessarily folks sharing, I have a mental health disorder of major depressive disorder or whatnot. But you also have to think about all the barriers to care and treatment and diagnosis, right? And how if we are less likely to have access to care, less likely to access quality care, more likely to be misdiagnosed, then I've known people who say they told me I have this, but I'm not receiving it. Right. I don't agree with
mhm,
this diagnosis. And if you were to ask that particular person, do they have a mental health condition? They would say no. And so
mhm,
I think that there's something about the data and the questions and the question askers that impacts our ability to really fully understand how
mhm,
prevalent it is. But I think if we look to chronic stressors over time, and we look to what's happened in the last couple of years, then I think that we would be able to likely think that there will be more and more mothers struggling with their mental health as we kind of get to some place of recovery in our
right,
society.
right,
And at the same time of movement, a really powerful movement of stop the stigma, let's talk, Taraji Henson and many other folks, Oprah and all these other big name folks, Charlemagne the God, like all these folks really talking
mhm,
about their mental health in a public platform. And so that's giving folks a language
mhm,
for their experiences,
mhm,
and then giving folks a pathway as we have more Black people, and particularly Black women, in the light, sharing their struggles. I think that folks are becoming more aware as it's becoming less stigmatized. And so then they're sharing concerns. So I think that we're going to continue to see um, higher rates among Black women than the national average because we just have a very different experience in this country. And because of
yeah,
systemic racism and structural oppression, things are getting better, but they are not great.
yeah,
Those factors are still there and those stresses are still high. And I go to school, go to work, go in the neighborhood, I'm still experiencing a whole lot of stress. And
mhm.
so it just depends, I think, as folks learn more and grow more in their coping strategies and have more of those healthy strategies, um, I think we'll be able to see better outcomes.
So I think that's a really great takeaway as well, that our rates are pretty high in the Black
Mm-hmm.
community. And
Yeah.
it would behoove us to be aware of that, to recognize it, maybe to be that soft voice of, I wonder if it would be helpful to have some couch time about how
Yeah.
you're feeling, because how you're feeling is sounding like it could be worrisome. So I think that's a really great takeaway.
Yeah. And folks having they say tools in the toolbox are like little phrases in their toolbox. We have all been listening over time to folks share with us their struggles. So that's not new to us, right?
Right,
And I
right.
think that we need to tune our ears into the fact that if a person is listing off a truckload of stressors, that
Mhm.
they probably might be having some symptoms of a mental health concern. Ask them how they're eating. Ask them how they're sleeping. Ask them, are they really worried, or are they having any fears? Like, ask them about, are you able to work well? Is work cool? Are you good with your
Mhm.
relationships? How's your mood? Like, these are some basic things. Just ask folks some more questions, and then see what they're doing. What are you doing about that, right? Folks
Mhm.
can like unload on us, and people say they do that all the time, is unload on folks. But then
Mhm.
ask them about, what are you doing about that? Do you need any help with that? Because that's a lot to carry. That's a lot for
Right.
anybody. Folks have been sharing their heaviness and weight for a long time. We don't ask enough questions
Mhm.
afterwards. They might
Mhm.
tell us to shut up or leave them alone, and that's fine. But just say, you
Mhm.
know what, that's heavy, and I am worried.
Right.
And if I was you, I would, consider some additional supports, because you don't have to do that alone. That's too heavy
Right.
for any person to handle.
Right. And it is about finding the words, right? Marie has a
Yeah.
good question in here, and it reminds me of one of my colleagues, one of the nurses that I work with, who is just brilliant and very accomplished. She had her second baby at the hospital where I work, and she told me, she said, "Listen, I really struggled with my first pregnancy, with postpartum depression, and I'm really scared about how I'm going to feel after this baby."
Mm-hmm.
We had lots of conversations. And she talked about, because she actually came and spoke at a conference that we were having, because there's nothing like the voice of the client, the voice of the mom, the voice of the woman. So she spoke in one of our conferences, and she talked about the fact that she knew she wasn't okay. And she talked to
Mm-hmm.
her mom, and she said to her mom, I don't feel okay. And her mom kept saying, um, from the old paradigm, go to church, talk to God about it. Have you prayed about it? Have you fasted about it? She's like, I think it's more than that. And
Right.
she finally sought help on her own. And it wasn't till almost a year later that she could have the conversation with her mom to tell her that she sought help, that she was on
Mm-hmm.
medication, and she feels
Mm-hmm.
so much better, and how she didn't feel seen or she didn't feel heard. She said it was a hard conversation, but she felt like it was
Mm-hmm.
an important conversation to have. But I think it's a good lead into Marie's question, and her question is about how do you address, family and friends when you try to tell somebody that you're not okay, who wants to say, well, count your blessings, there's another thing, count your
Yes.
blessings,
Right.
you're doing well, you have this big beautiful
Mm-hmm.
house. how
Mm-hmm.
how do we help people navigate through that conversation when somebody's not giving them helpful advice or saying count your blessings?
Right. 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 I think that's such an important question, and it's one that we have to tread lightly, because respect is everything. Relationships are everything to us, and it depends on who you're talking to, right?
Mhm. Definitely.
Because I can't come in my mom in any kind of way,
Right.
right? And while a friend, for example, you could literally coach them into coaching, like coach them into how to coach you, right? Coach them into how to better support you. For your mother, father, grandmother, aunties, folks who are older than you, right? I think you have to be really cautious about how you respond, because the potential damage to that relationship, and that really crosses some folks' cultural values, and I want to acknowledge that, because that's a factor. um but I think that it's about really being grounded in yourself. And one of the things that I learned in my own research is that getting support from family and friends could be helpful and it could be stressful at the same time. And I think the moms from my study who spoke about their decision making, one of the things that I remember taking away that was so powerful is this mom who just decided, I don't have to tell them the thing. There are certain people that I don't talk to about my mental health related stuff because I know that it is a lost cause and that's going to create more stress. I'm going to feel worse. And I know that from trial and error. I'm not talking to them about these kinds of things. And I think that's hard because sometimes we have these assumptions about that's my mom. I should be able to talk to them about everything, right? That's my sister. I should be able to talk to her about everything. But I think it's really making yourself aware of how you feel when you're in relationship and in a conversation with any given person and noticing how you feel in your body. And if you are already stressed and struggling, don't even interact with the person who is going to create more stress. Instead, choose different. And that's where I say that folks have to understand the benefits and the limitations of their options. Because talking to this person while they're going to be there, you trust them, might not be helpful, might not be the best thing for you. And instead, that stranger who is well trained might be a better look.
Right.
Even though you have to move through kind of some of the discomfort in not knowing them, not trusting them, that kind of a thing. But I think that's the thing that I really would love for folks to consider is be okay with recognizing how you feel in your body when you interact with different people. And if you feel some kind of way when you're talking to any given person, then notice that and recognize it and validate it within yourself because you already going through enough.
Right.
You don't need no extra stress. You're trying to get support or help. So then I think it's making choices to choose to talk to other people or expanding our network, which I think is hard for folks because I only got a few friends. I don't need no more. I'm like that too. I got 4 friends. I've had them for the last 20 years and I'm cool, right? And also I know that those 4 friends, I know who I can talk to what about.
Right.
And I'm okay with that and they okay with it too, because I can't share everything with everybody.
With everyone.
Because sometimes that could be more stressful. So there's some solutions though too that are in a poem. I can drop it in the chat for y'all to check out a poem that was created from some of the quotes from some of the mothers who participated in my study, and it was done here in the Kansas City metro area where I live. But in this, there's some solutions. The mothers talk about folks asking them a couple of times how they're doing. Some of the mothers shared about how they coach somebody into being more helpful, just being straightforward with them and letting them know that what you're saying is not helpful. And I think that too is nice.
Yeah. Do you want to share that? Do you want to?
Oh yeah, I can share the poem now.
We're wrapping up, and I think that would be a powerful way for us to, if you're willing to share it with us.
Yeah, totally. I would love that. And I think it really does align with the comment about, having struggles, trying to express them. And then also the many options that are there, but some of the struggles that are within the options. So it's a lot. It's a lot for a person to decide to talk to somebody and then to just really at the end of the day, keep doing this trial and error thing is what I would really encourage folks to do. Keep doing what makes sense until you get to feeling better. Explore the options that you have and don't be afraid of asking for help. I'll go in here and I will share my screen.
All right.
So I would say that as I start, this poem was spoken as a spoken word piece. This woman featured, this beautiful Black woman, is my sister, and she has 3 boys. And she was not a part of my study, but her and many of the other mothers who have heard this um, have felt every word. And so I hope that as you listen to it, you can understand the struggle, but also that we leave this space thinking about some of the solutions that these Black mothers said would be helpful to their mental health, but that also it creates space for us to wonder about and ask the Black mothers in our world what would be most helpful for them.
Asked about my mental health, I replied, I had it until apparently I didn't. I was stressed at an all time high and I cried. I cried. I thought I was going to die. Pressure from every direction, it's a lot, all the time. Because of that, you just get tired, period, of life. Just feeling heavy all the time. When asked about supports for my mental health, there were many things that came to mind. I have some that are like a root to my life, like the people in my life and God. They have supported me during tough times. But sometimes the support is stressful, and I'm trying to keep my stress levels low. It's just almost easier for me to just not talk to anybody. Pretty much every time I talk to someone, it ends up turning into a conversation about them. Either way I go, I'm stressed, I guess. Honestly, I don't know how much I trust most. Embarrassed and feeling almost naked, I really, really rarely want to ask for help. This is part of the reason I keep it to myself. I don't trust a lot of people just to be talking to them. That's from a lot of experience, yet I need help. I need to calm down. I need help with the kids. I need time. I need rest. I wanted to try some kind of therapy, coaching group, or something, but it is a struggle to find someone or something Black, while I prefer Black women. I can work with someone non judgmental, a good listener, and in tune with being Black. If you're going to support me full heartedly. You can be more supportive than just asking, how are you? I like when people say, if there's anything I can get you, let me know. Or say, what can I do to help you? I feel like people skip that sometimes. I need you to understand. You have to ask me, how are you, a couple of times. Then be okay that I might say, I'm okay. What the fuck do you want? To me, social support is people that can help, but it's not guaranteed. When was the last time somebody said, well, can I get you something? Can I cook you something for dinner today? Do you want us to take the kids for a weekend? Sure. Knock yourself out. Get in where you fit in. Just help me. I try to do self-time. It's hard. I'm constantly doing something. It's just always something going on. That's just how it is. If I could just have more me time, that would help my mental health. I need time, period. Just time to listen to music, time to cook, or time to be lounging, whatever. That stuff is common to me. To recharge, that is what I need. Add time. Help that is more understanding and not draining, more open minded and not judging. When my mental health is at a bad place, I'm really kind of vulnerable. Trying to deal with stuff on your own, that's a real headache too. But I'm learning to do self and ask for help. And I'm really trying to be in tune and intentional about the choices I'm making. Now, what will you do? Need ideas? Here are a few. If there was some type of support groups for moms, that would be so helpful. What about a mental health life coach? Is there such a thing? Someone that can guide me? You know what I'm saying? Maybe like a talk line to call if you feel like you're stressed. Someone who could be there for anyone, anytime, anywhere. When I'm on E, I can't think. So I need someone who can tell me what I have to do. I don't have time to jump through hoops. Last thing, maybe some trainings. I feel like there is a huge need for some training on how to be more gentle, open, accepting, and not judging. Get in where you fit in. Just help me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was so great. I can't think of a better way for us to end. We're just a little over time. Oops, 4 minutes over time. I'm gonna wrap with just one quick thing. I wanted to tell you that the person that I was referencing that had a difficulty with her first and her second pregnancy and was talking to me and had talked to her mom. We were chatting around Mother's Day, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing for Mother's Day?" She's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I am getting a hotel for Friday night and Saturday night to be by myself. And I'm so
Yes,
excited." And I
yes,
was like, "Yay, I love that." And it was not what I expected to hear, but I love that she was making herself a priority and understanding what she needed. So I think
absolutely.
a great takeaway. This has been so wonderful, Amita. This has been so great. I'm so appreciative of your time and your wisdom and sharing the work that you've done. So, for everyone who is listening, we I'm going to use her sister's words. Get in where you fit in. I think that's powerful. Help wherever you can. Recognize that this is really an issue for all birthing people, but especially the marginalized community, and be a source of hope, be a source of encouragement, be a source of help. That's probably the best thing that we can do. Any final words, Dr. Parker, for the people, for the peeps?
Yeah, I'm just so grateful to be in this space and to be in conversation with you in this dialogue. It has really been wonderful to me. And I want to just thank all the Black mothers who have shared their insight and experiences with me. And I'm also just want to thank God for taking me through my own journey with my mental health as I do this work. And if anything else I leave you with is just don't let anybody guilt you or shame you into taking care of yourself,
Mhm.
because you can die trying. And I made a commitment that I will not die trying. So I'm going to prioritize myself care, managing my emotions, and taking care of myself, because that's the best thing I can do for my children and family.
Yes, girl. The very best thing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kim, for your takeaway. The body keeps score. Secrets make you sick. Thank you,
Yes.
everyone, for participating and putting in your comments. Join us again. Marie, do you want to talk about May 24th? What we have coming up?
Oh, I am so Dr. Parker, and I'd already had an advance of the video, and it still just touched my heart. On May 24th, we will have another panel discussion with a lovely somatic healer. Her name is Kay Domiana, and look for the email. We'll send some background on her and her work. Dr. Parker, I cannot thank you enough for sharing, and I've got notes upon notes upon notes. And I think the one that probably, as a minister's daughter, I think something that really resonated for me, and the question that I asked was from a family member around, how do you address when they're like, oh, you're blessed, and there are people who are worse off. So that is certainly one that I think a lot of us have to struggle, and just recognizing that sometimes you may not be fed from that particular well. So thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Rose. You guys, I felt like I was watching Oprah and Gail. And
I'm Oprah, Anita, okay?
Yes, I love it. I'm with it.
you guys can take this on the road. I think anyone that missed it, you need to you need to come back and listen to this again. Dr. Parker, thank you. I will, when I send out the recording, I will also include the video to Dr. Parker's poem. And one of the attendees had texted me and said, I just wanted to send this to my mama and say nothing else.
Listen, my mom, when she heard it, she saw herself in it. I didn't get to say that earlier, and I was thinking, she said that this gave me a language for what I was experiencing. Y'all thought I was angry or mad or mean, right? I was struggling. And so
Wow.
I think, do send that to your mom and your
Wow.
aunties, and let everybody get that language of understanding, is that when you are stressed and you are struggling, yes, your mental health will be impacted, but do something
Yeah.
on purpose
Right.
for your mental health and well-being.
Love it.
Well, on that note, I think we will let everyone go unless there's anything else for, as you guys say, for the good of the order. Thank you. Thank you both so much. Have a good night.
Bye. Bye, everyone.